Hello everyone. Just wanting to make sure this is all working. My name's Rebecca. I am from FODMAP Dietetics. I am a dietitian in Melbourne, based in Melbourne. And today I'm going to be doing a live Q&A with the From and Allergy Community to talk all about FODMAPs and the Low FODMAP Diet. So I'm just wanting to make sure that this is all set up and working, and I'll just allow a bit of time for everyone to jump on and join me. Just make sure that's all good. If you want to ask any questions for me, please just write a comment. So that is going to be, so we're going to be talking all about FODMAPs today. So feel free to just post a comment and ask any questions you have about the low FODMAP diet, IBS, and all about FODMAPs. So I'll just wait a couple of minutes to let everyone join in. I'm coming to you here today from our consult room at FODMAP Dietetics. This is where I see clients one-on-one. We've got a lovely wall behind me here, which is a wall of FODMAP-friendly products. So I'll get into that a little bit more shortly so that you can learn all about them as well. So I'll just allow some time for people to join in, and hopefully it's working in terms of comments. And if you have a comment, please just feel free to ask. And I've got a few things that I'll talk about today, specifically what FODMAP is, and I'm sure being in the From and Allergy Community, which is such a great community for people with food intolerance and allergies, this is definitely an area or a topic that would relate to a lot of people who have to follow a restricted diet or have food intolerance. So great place to be for us all. It's a shame that the show had to be postponed to next year, the From and Allergy show, but what a great place to all be able to connect again and to you'd basically learn more and connect in this online space during these pretty challenging times. But yeah, thank God for technology for getting us all together. All right. So I might get started with just introducing myself. So my name's Rebecca. I'm an Accredited Practicing Dietitian, and I'm based in Melbourne in Australia. I love the gut, essentially, and I love gut health. So that's why I work in this space, and specifically I like to work in the area of IBS and digestive disorders. So people who suffer with uncomfortable gut symptoms, digestive problems, and so often this does relate to food and what we eat. So this is definitely an area that I find so interesting, and it's amazing to see how just by looking at what we're eating and how we're eating, we can impact, basically the quality of life for so many people. Hi Fiona, nice to see you join in there. So where I work at the moment, I work for FODMAP Dietetics, which is a private practice company based in Ringwood in Melbourne. And I see clients here, hi Carly, sorry. And I see clients who are who have basically kind of these digestive issues that I was just speaking about, or who have IBS. But I also see clients with all kinds of other conditions. So for some people that might be, even just looking at their overall health. Maybe they want to improve their gut health in general. Maybe we're looking at other factors like diabetes, or they might have a heart condition, high blood pressure, that sort of thing. So I do one-on-one consultations, but primarily we focus on digestive health. I also work as part of the team at FODMAP Friendly, which some of you may be familiar with the little green FODMAP Friendly logo that we see sometimes on food products. So FODMAP Friendly is a company that certifies low FODMAP food products. So they test food products that might have come in from manufacturers and companies who've created a food product and they want to check if it's low in FODMAPs. So they test them. If they pass the testing, they get certified, and you see that little green logo. I've got some bread here just as an example. So what we're looking for is this little green FODMAP friendly logo, and that means you can safely eat it on the low FODMAP diet. So it's a bit of a rest assured, you know that what you're eating is going to be safe to eat and it's not going to be, causing any digestive issues. Just seen Wendy's jumped on. Hello. So I work across the two, and that's a really great, a really great way for me to see what it's like from an individual client perspective and working with individuals one-on-one to really work out what's triggering their gut symptoms and work out how we can create a individualized plan to support them to have basically digestive relief. But then I also get to see what's happening in the food industry space and what food products are available and what new products are available in the low FODMAP space. And let me tell you, it's growing and it's just getting bigger and bigger. So it's such an exciting space to be in. So today, I'm just going to start with a few questions or a bit of an overview of what FODMAP actually is. And who the low FODMAP diet is really designed for, how it all works, because it's a little bit different to other diets, so to speak. So even just to start there, when we talk about a diet, usually people think about maybe something they're going to go on to try and lose weight or to improve their health or something like that. The low FODMAP diet, of course, it can help to improve health in terms of your digestion for people who have some funny gut symptoms or tummy troubles, but it's not necessarily like a diet that we would call like I'm going on a diet to try and lose weight or something like that. It's more of an actual prescriptive approach that we and it's very specific, and we apply it in more of a medical sense, I suppose. So we're looking at really helping with gut health here and digestion. So a bit of an overview. So FODMAP is an acronym, and FODMAPs are to put it simply, they're called short-chain carbohydrates, or sometimes called sugars. So if we flash back to high school chemistry, let's say, if you can remember anything from then, so we probably learnt at that time a little bit about the breakdown of food, and one of the main nutrients in food is carbohydrates. And carbohydrates are basically all made up of small sugar molecules that are joined together to create like a chain. So FODMAPs are short chain carbohydrates. So they're sort of small chains of these sugars. That's why sometimes they're called sugars, sometimes they're called short chain carbohydrates, but that all kind of means the same thing really in terms of FODMAPs. So what happens with these short chain carbohydrates is in some people they are not easily digested through our small intestine or absorbed into the body where we'd normally see digestion occur, and then they travel down into our large intestine, which is kind of the last main part of our digestive tract, and that's where the FODMAPs kind of start to have a bit of an effect on the body. So in people with a sensitive gut, they can, these FODMAPs are fermented and they can also draw water into the bowel. And so this fermentation process, it occurs because in our gut we have a whole range of bacteria and yeasts and microorganisms, and that's called our gut microbiome, which you may have heard of. It's becoming a really big area of research at the moment. And so this gut microbiome, the bacteria in the gut microbiome are what really creates this gas and this build-up of fermentation. So it's not a bad thing that they're fermenting on these FODMAPs and causing gas, but in people with a more sensitive stomach, they really feel that. So they feel the bloating, the abdominal pain, distension, and sometimes it can change your bowel habits. So it might be a little bit more on the loose side, you might feel a little bit clogged up and constipated, so they can have a different kind of effect. So that's really what we understand as what FODMAPs are doing, and really this is occurring most commonly in the case of people who have Irritable Bowel Syndrome, or IBS, which is a digestive condition. It's very common, 1 in 7 people have it, and So therefore, a lot of people may benefit from the low FODMAP diet. But what researchers from Monash University here in Melbourne really came to realise was that by reducing the amount of these FODMAPs in the diet, they started to see that it improved symptoms of people with IBS. So these digestive, bloating, abdominal pain, altered bowel habits, they started to improve on the low FODMAP diet. And in fact, it's actually about 75% of people with IBS see improvements on the diet, which is pretty awesome. That's a pretty good figure for research. So just to break down FODMAP itself, it's an acronym. So it does stand for, the F is for fermentable, meaning that these molecules or these carbohydrates can be fermented in that large intestine, as I just mentioned. The O is oligosaccharide, D is disaccharide, M is monosaccharide, A is for and, so that's nice and easy, and P is for polyols. So these, the kind of last part of the acronym, really just mean different types of sugars. So the oligosaccharides are chains of sugars. They're found in things like onion, garlic, wheat, that sort of thing as well. They're also found in your legumes and grains. Some nuts also have the oligosaccharide group in them. The D is disaccharide, so that is referring to lactose, which many people may be familiar with lactose intolerance, so that falls into the FODMAP, comes under the FODMAP category as well. So lactose is a carbohydrate that's found in dairy, mainly in things like milk, yogurt, custard, cream, ice cream, those sort of foods. Sometimes in cheese, but a lot of cheeses are actually low lactose, which is great. The M stands for monosaccharide, which refers to fructose. So that's just one sugar. But what we know is that some people don't have a lot of the enzyme that we use to basically absorb that sugar. And so when we have it in a large amount, when an excess amount, it can cause these digestive symptoms. So that's found in things like honey, some fruit and vegetables, so things like asparagus. It's also in things like apples or fruit juice. Probably more in the US, you'd see it in high fructose corn syrup as well. A is the and P stands for polyols. So these are sugar alcohols, not like the wine or the alcohol that we like to drink, but what it basically just means is that if you're looking in on the chemical equation or the chemical structure, it has a little alcohol group to it. So that's just more of a chemical thing when we look really close into it. But basically these are sugar alcohols, have a sweet taste, but they don't get digested normally and absorbed. So they make it down to the large intestine and they can cause those gut symptoms. They're found naturally in foods. So there's sorbitol and mannitol, the main ones, and they can be found naturally in stone fruits or in things like cauliflower and mushrooms, but you can also find them added to food products. So quite often they're used as a sweetening agent in things like sugar-free chewing gum or sugar-free sweetened drinks as well. So that's the P group there. So that's the FODMAP kind of broken down. Basically, the way they cause these digestive symptoms is from that fermentation that occurs in the large intestine that causes, so fermentation produces gas creates that air, it can stretch and kind of trigger the gut wall, which is more sensitive in people with IBS, and that sends a message up to the brain saying that there's something going on here, and the brain recognizes it as a signal of pain, even though it's a normal digestive process where we wouldn't normally feel pain. So that's where we can start to see some abdominal pain. The gas, flatulence and things and bloating can occur from that actual gas production. And then some of these FODMAPs really attract water as well. So they'll draw a lot of water into the bowel, and that's where we can start to see things like diarrhea occur. So the low FODMAP diet, it's a diet that basically reduces the amount of FODMAPs in the diet with the aim of reducing these symptoms. But it actually has 3 phases. So the first phase is that you follow an elimination phase of the diet. So for about 2 to 6 weeks, you completely have follow a low FODMAP diet to try and see if we can get that digestive relief to occur. After that, then we want to test and challenge every single one of these FODMAPs with really specific test foods that we can use to determine what your tolerance is to individual FODMAPs. So I've mentioned a lot of foods there, but not everyone's going to be sensitive to all those foods. So in most of the cases that I see with patients, they might have 1 or 2 FODMAPs that are their main triggers, and they're the only ones that they're the main ones that they need to focus on, and then they can actually tolerate a lot more other foods and a lot more other FODMAPs at higher levels too. So that challenge phase is so important because what it really does is individualize and work out what is actually triggering your symptoms individually, so that then you can move on to the third phase, which is basically maintenance or personalization, where you reintroduce as much food as possible into the diet based on what you tolerated, and then you also want to keep those symptoms at bay. So that's what that 3-phase approach really is. And working with a dietitian can be really important and really useful during this process because it's a kind of a confusing diet to get your head around. A lot of the time, FODMAPs are kind of hidden and a bit sneaky in food products. So if they don't have that little FODMAP-friendly logo on them, it can be kind of hard to know what foods you can eat. And also when going through that challenge phase, you want to make sure that you're doing it in a really specific and systematic way so that we're not, having, so that we get really accurate results at the end of it, with the overall aim being to have as much variety in your diet as you can. So the low FODMAP diet is sometimes confused as being something you're on long term, but really we only want to be on that elimination phase for about 2 to 6 weeks or a short period of time. And if you don't experience some symptom relief after that, well, then we really want to be looking at, maybe there's something else going on here. One thing I should say is before even starting this diet, if you have digestive symptoms, the first thing to do is speak to your GP or your doctor just to have a look and investigate whether there's anything else going on, because there are a lot of other conditions that present exactly the same pretty much as irritable bowel syndrome. So things like celiac disease, things like sometimes it could be an allergy, it could also be something like an inflammatory bowel disease happening as well, or even cancer. So we want to be really on top of it and make sure that we're ruling out other things so that this diet is, so that you're getting the appropriate dietary advice and the dietary approach to help improve your symptoms. I've got just a little question here from Wendy asked, food allergies and FODMAPs related? So this is a great question. What we think of with FODMAPs is more food intolerance rather than food allergy. So they're 2 different things. An intolerance, actually I'll start with an allergy. An allergy really is an immune reaction. So it's when the immune system is reacting to something that wouldn't normally react to. So our immune system will react to pathogens and things in the environment when, like a bug, for example, if you pick up a bug when you're overseas, your immune system might react to that. But in case of food allergies, the immune system is reacting to specific proteins in food. So it might be a wheat allergy, or it might be a dairy allergy, a shellfish allergy, for example. Often these are diagnosed in childhood, but they can come about later in life as well. And so food allergies are an immune response. They can include digestive symptoms, but they might also have other symptoms, and they can be really serious. For example, in the case of anaphylaxis, where it really affects the airways and it's a medical emergency essentially. So allergies are different to food intolerances. Most of the time in allergies, we want to be completely avoiding that food altogether. Intolerances, you may actually tolerate certain amounts of that food. So you actually could be able to include small amounts. So for example, with lactose intolerance, some people are able to have a little bit of milk in their coffee or their tea and they're fine. Whereas in a dairy allergy, we wouldn't want to be doing that. So that's just, I hope that kind of helps to differentiate them. The FODMAPs are, it's not an allergy that we're talking about when we're talking about FODMAPs. It's more of an intolerance or a sensitivity. I've got another question here. Do people with fructose malabsorption have to avoid all the FODMAPs or just monosaccharides? That's a great question. So a lot of people have been diagnosed, or they may have done a breath test and found out that they have a fructose malabsorption. Firstly, it's important to know that if you malabsorb fructose, it doesn't necessarily mean you're intolerant to fructose. So malabsorption is meaning that it's not completely being absorbed the fructose is not being absorbed in that small intestine and it's moving down to the large intestine. But what we call an intolerance is when you experience symptoms from that. So some people malabsorb something, but they won't really get many gut symptoms. So that's fine. If you get gut symptoms, then we recognize that as an intolerance. If you have had a fructose malabsorption, you don't necessarily, or you have any fructose intolerance, you don't necessarily have to be cutting out all the FODMAPs. But there are some FODMAPs that we can't test for with a breath test. So particularly the O in FODMAP is that group. And a lot of people I find are actually sensitive to that group rather than the fructose, or they might be sensitive to both. So doing the low FODMAP diet, it's really worth individually talking to a dietitian or even a doctor to start with, and what I would recommend doing is writing down all the foods that you seem to get symptoms from. So doing a little bit of a food diary and thinking back to what you ate when you experienced symptoms, and then presenting that when you go and see a doctor or a dietitian. Particularly a dietitian will be quite an expert in this area if they're trained in FODMAPs and gut health, but they'll be able to look at those foods and think, are those foods containing just fructose, or do they have some of these other FODMAPs in them? And if they do, then that's when we start to look at, okay, maybe let's try eliminating or reducing more of those FODMAPs in the diet. So sometimes there are other sensitivities, but it's not always the case. And the thing is that food doesn't necessarily select to have one FODMAP in an apple, for example. So in an apple, we might find fructose and sorbitol. So two of the FODMAPs in the one food. So that's another thing. So you might be sensitive to one, but not the other, or you might be sensitive to both of them. And sometimes they're found in multiple foods. So it can get a little bit confusing, but by writing things out and coming up with a bit of a diet history of what you've been eating and what you've experienced is the best way to sort of go forward and see, is there likely any other intolerances going on there? I hope that kind of makes sense in that regard. So you don't necessarily have to cut out all of the FODMAPs, but it's important to work out what's triggering your symptoms, and a dietitian can help there. A couple of other questions I had from earlier before is around, is the diet safe for kids to go on, the low FODMAP diet? So in terms of kids, we're really, as a dietitian, I'm really aware that I want kids to have a really good variety of food and to have as much variety as possible, because they're probably being introduced to new foods throughout their childhood, and we really want to get that variety, not just from a pleasure perspective, but also to ensure that they are getting as many nutrients as possible, or basically meeting their nutrient requirements, because kids are growing, so they need a lot of energy and they need lots of things like protein, iron, calcium, so a lot of different nutrients. So the diet, if kids do experience gut symptoms, or they might have something like a lactose intolerance, so then the low FODMAP diet may be suitable for them, but I would really suggest not just going straight to it. Firstly, getting a lot of things checked out, making sure it's not actually an allergy going on or another gut condition. And if it is that they are having a bit of gut sensitivities to certain foods or FODMAPs, what I would do with kids is probably to take more of a gentle approach than a strict elimination diet. So we'd probably be looking at their diet and thinking, what are the main triggers that seem to be relating to their symptoms? What kind of foods are they eating that pair with symptomatic reactions? And just reducing the main ones is probably one way that I would go about it, because we really don't want to be restricting food too much on the diet. So it's very individual, I guess, and if you're worried about your child with gut sensitivities, definitely recommend sort of starting with the doctor and then seeing a gut health expert dietitian to help lead the way there, because we want to be really careful that they're also still getting all their nutrients in. So that's a little bit, that's another question there I had. If anyone's got any more questions, feel free to pop them down, but that kind of sums it up a little bit. I feel like I've done a little bit of a word vomit there, but hopefully everyone learnt a little bit of information about FODMAPs and the low FODMAP diet. It's something that can have such great benefits for people, but I should also mention that it's not always the first line that I'll go to. So depending on what you've tried individually to help work out your symptoms or how to manage your IBS, we might actually just start with something really simple and not even go straight to FODMAPs. We might just look into maybe one if it looks like it's triggering you, or we might actually just look at other areas like how you're eating. So are you eating on the go, or are you actually having time to chew your food and help with proper digestion? I also like to incorporate suggestions around, I guess, mindfulness and stress reduction, because that has such a big link with IBS symptoms. And then we'd look at things like your hydration levels, how much fibre you're having and the types of fibre you're having in the diet, and if there's any other gut irritants like coffee or alcohol or those kind of things that aren't inherently high FODMAP, but they basically can help to, or they can cause a little bit of gut irritation. So we'd look at those kind of things first in that sort of aspect as well. It's not always the go-to for that diet. Couple of questions here. Do you have a link we can share that you recommend? Yep, I can pop in some links below in the comments about the Low FODMAP diet. I can also pop in links to our social media, so to FODMAP Dietetics Instagram page and our website if you're interested in speaking to me, or to find out, if you have IBS or you're looking to go look into the Low FODMAP diet. I'll pop the links in there just below. And what are the worst foods for FODMAP triggers? Look, the main ones are things like onion and garlic. They're big ones. Some people find wheat a sensitivity. That's not related to gluten. So gluten's not a FODMAP. It's related to the fructan, which is the O in the FODMAP acronym. So sometimes that's a big trigger. Most of the time, in terms of like fructose, things like fruit juice, honey, a kind of high fructose corn syrup, milk, if you're sensitive to lactose, is one. And then a lot of the sugar-free sweetened foods, so sweetened drinks or bars and things are the main ones that I'd also look into. So yeah, those are probably the main ones, and a lot of people find relief just from eliminate or reducing those foods in the diet. Do you have any specific advice around fatty liver disease? That's something I can certainly provide a little bit more information around. So again, that's not just a question around non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. The advice that I would give would probably be very individualized with that one. So it probably would depend on what you're eating already and what your background has been and your history has been there. So with what things you've tried or what your symptoms are and things like that. So not so much related to digestive disorders there, but I could certainly, I'd probably want to speak to you and find out what your background is before advising as a general recommendation in that area. Hope that makes sense. So if anyone has any other questions, feel free to put them in the comments. I can get back to you and I'll just respond on there, and I'll pop our details in there. So thank you for tuning in. Hope everyone has a great day. It looks like it's kind of nice and sunny outside now, so might go out and get some sunshine. Take care. Look out for yourself, and I'll hopefully see you all again soon. Bye.